And these people he met, they were not very pleasant for him. And he was tested whether he can withstand all these things. There was this guy called Ziba. Ziba was a man who knew how to come to David in his most difficult moment when David needed supplies, and he came with supplies and he gave him food and wine and stuff like that. But then he ended up slandering his master Mephibosheth, such that the king can disfavor him, so that he can be in favor with the king. And he ended up exploiting and extorting stuff from David. He was an extortionist and an exploiter and a manipulator. And David fell for him and fell for all the tricks. And then from there, as he was still continuing to go down the mountain, he met Shimei. Shimei was a man of anger. A man who was filled with rage. And he cursed David. He threw rocks at him. And he threw dirt on David. And he said all these despicable things about David in front of all his men. And even some people suggested that they should take his head off. But David said, I will not do such a thing. Maybe God has granted him the will and the power to insult me. But also David realized that maybe I also can use this to seek favor from the Lord. Maybe the Lord will have mercy upon me when he sees how these people are treating me and I'm not fighting back. So he let everything slide. He was able to succeed by not being baited into rage. Now, things were not over yet. This was a domino effect for David. He was coming from the mountaintop where he got reassured by God, where God showed him what to do. God brought him Hushai, and he knew that Hushai was the man who was going to go and cause damage into the kingdom of his son Absalom, and he sent him back. But also he has Zadok, the priest, who is there also, alongside his sons. But things are still very uncertain. Now, in chapter 16, verses 15, we see another domino falling. And this is going to be actually triggered by Ahithophel. Ahithophel was David's closest buddy. They were friends. He was his consultant. David describes Ahithophel as the kind of guy whom they used to walk in the throng together going to church. Like, as you can see, you can imagine the king. When the king was going to church, he was not coming by himself. He always had a mob of people following him, going to church. But Ahithophel was one of the guys who was just right here, escorting him to go to church. And when they came to church, I also believe that they sat together with Ahithophel. They enjoyed time with each other very, very, very well. They trusted each other. But David did something to Ahithophel. I don't know if David ever considered it. I don't know if David thought that maybe since Ahithophel was his friend, he would never really pay any attention to it. But Bathsheba was Ahithophel's granddaughter. And Bathsheba was happily married to Uriah. And their family was amazing, awesome young family. And Ahithophel had no problem. He was really happy that finally his granddaughter had gotten himself a man. And this man was a very good man. And here comes David one morning or evening. He goes up on his rooftop and sees this girl and he likes her. And then he brings her in his house and he messes with her. And then she gets pregnant. And then she tells David, I'm pregnant. And David begins to fumble. David begins to panic. David brings Uriah back home because he wanted Uriah to be the one to be responsible for the pregnancy. But Uriah was such a good man, was such a man who had so much respect for David and also for the men who were out there in the trenches fighting, but also for the ark of God that was out there in the field. So he said, I will never do such a thing. I will never go in my house and sleep with my wife when all my comrades are out there in the struggle. No way. And he slept outside for so many nights. And David ran out of the tricks. And the last trick that he had up on his sleeve was a dirty one. It was filled with murder, bloodshed. His heart got cold and he sanctioned for the death of Uriah by a stroke of a pen. And Uriah gets to die out there for no good reason. Now that thing is what hurt Ahithophel. Why would my friend do such a thing to me? Why would my friend... Whoa, it's 9:45. I never knew that it was that actually late. So Ahithophel was like, why would my friend do such a thing to me? Why would he mess my granddaughter's family? Why would he break her family? Why would he kill my son-in-law? I thought we were friends. He took it personal. And from then on, he really hated David, but secretly. David was still the king. And you don't get to hate the king openly. So he hated him secretly. And I think it began to be like, man, I wish we have a new king to reign in this country because this one is no longer fit. Now, here comes Absalom. I don't know because the Bible does not tell us how Ahithophel and Absalom were able to sit down and actually connect. We don't know how they connected. But perhaps they connected because both of them, they were hurt by the same man, David. David hurt his son Absalom because of Absalom's sister, Tamar, who was also violated so badly by her brother, Amnon. And David did nothing. And he heard Absalom's like, what kind of father is this? What kind of a dad is this guy? And what kind of a king is this guy? Maybe they met over for tea. And he's like, man, I have something bothering me about my father. Because he is the older gentleman. And Ahithophel is the counselor. Maybe this guy, Absalom, had gone for some counsel from him. And they felt for him. For some reason, they felt like they were in the same boat. It's like, bro, I know. That's weird. David also did this to me. Though I'm the counselor, but I'm also hurting. You know, sometimes people bond when they share the same incident, when you have the same history. Maybe that's how they got to connect. And they both felt like, you know what? We need to work together to bring in a new government. And now, Ahithophel is the guy on the scene. And then now Absalom was very successful in ousting his father from his throne and also chase him out of Jerusalem, the capital. And now Absalom is the new king. And no one is saying he shouldn't be the king. Actually, as a matter of fact, everybody likes Absalom. And everybody thinks Absalom should be the one to take over from his father. Now, in verses 15 here, it says that Absalom and all the people and the men of Israel, meaning that he had the backing of the whole country, they came to Jerusalem now, finally, to sit in their seat of administration. Just look at it, that Absalom, he inaugurated himself as king. He proclaimed himself as king in Hebron. Maybe that would be someplace as far as, let's say, Masaka, okay? But then, Masaka is not the what? It's not the capital, but also it's not the state house. So the state house was in Jerusalem. So now, Ahithophel comes with Absalom and all these group of men. They are ready now to go and set up their government in the state house Entebbe. So they come to Entebbe. Verse 16, it says, and so it was when Hushai the Archite, David's friend, came to Absalom, that Hushai said to Absalom, long live the king, long live the king. So Absalom said to Hushai, is this your loyalty to your friend? Why did you not go with your friend? You remember Hushai, don't you? Remember David, he goes up the mountain crying, weeping, with no shoes in his feet. And on that mountain, that's when he got to know that actually Ahithophel is also part of the conspiracy. And David prays just one short prayer and he says, oh Lord, please turn Ahithophel's counsel into what? Foolishness. Now he goes a little bit further to the mountain to what? To pray. And as he was coming back down, he meets Hushai. And then Hushai comes and is like, oh, I'm so sorry. He tore his clothes. And David said, Hushai, you're not coming with me, because if you do come with me, you're going to be a burden. But I want you to go back to Jerusalem, and you are going to defeat Ahithophel's advice for me. Now, this is the Hushai. Hushai was also a fighter. The Bible is calling him the Archite. Like he was very good at what? At shooting bow and arrow. But also he had another skill. I think his other skill was also he was the second guy who could also David would get advice from. He was a very well respected man at the palace. Also a bit older, probably David's age, also Ahithophel's age. These are the elders that you want to get advice from, because they've been around for a very long time. They know things, they've seen things, they hear things. So, Hushai also is David's friend. The Bible puts it there because the Bible wants you to know that he's not a friend of Absalom, but he's who? A friend of David. And that's why David wanted someone he can trust to be over there, to go over there and be his eyes and his ears. So when he came to Absalom, he said, long live the king, long live the king. Meaning he was bowing down And he was saying, you are the king. He is the first person actually to acknowledge Absalom as the king. The first guy who was not there when Absalom was proclaiming himself as king. He's more of an outsider, but he's also saying, I recognize you as the king and I pay my respect to you. Now this meant so much to Absalom because he was not part of his gang. He was not his people. He was David's guy. But then when he comes and he says, long live the king, long live the king, he's like, wow, I didn't know that also Hushai actually felt this way. I don't know, me and Ahithophel really hit it off so well. And me and Ahithophel cooked this whole thing up. But I didn't know that actually Hushai would be on my side. So this took him by surprise, if you would. And he's surprised. That's why in 17 he asked the question, is this your loyalty to your friend? He also, now you need to understand that Absalom is such a smart young man. He's kind of like reading through all this. Maybe he's like, man, this guy maybe is just puffing me up. So he begins with a question. He's not like, oh yeah, I'm the king. So he begins by firing a question. This question was a question that could have rattled Hushai. It's a question that would have actually thrown him off his game. Because it's like, bro, is this how you pay your friends? You basically, he's saying you shouldn't be here, bro. You should be with David because David is your friend. Absalom is saying, I don't think I can trust you. I don't think I can trust you if you have no loyalty. If David was your friend and you've just jumped ship just like that and you've come to me, I don't know if I trust you. So he's like, what made you to not go with David? He is your friend. Now, this was a test for Hushai. Is Hushai going to be a good spy? Because remember, he was sent to be a spy. And now this question is supposed to blow him out of the water. Is he going to be a good spy? Is he going to shake? Is he going to fumble? Is he going to kind of like spill the tea? 18. And Hushai said to Absalom, no, but whom the Lord and his people and all the men of Israel choose, his I will be. But I hope you see, he has answered the question. Because the question is this your loyalty to your friend? Why did you not go with your friend? And he said, no, it's not my loyalty at all. However, I see that the Lord has chosen you. And also the people have chosen you. I will also follow what the rest of other people have followed and what the Lord has chosen. And then he also say, his I will be, and with him I will remain. Furthermore, whom should I serve? Should I not serve in the presence of his son as I served in your father's presence? So I'll be in your presence. He actually brings in God. Because these are the words that Absalom, I think, desperately needs to hear. He needs to hear that actually God has what? Chosen him to take over, to be the new king. But also, these are the words that Absalom needed to hear, that the people are also on his side. And he's like, okay, I like the way you talk. He spoke so well. But also, do you understand? He appoints himself. Absalom is not the one appointing him. to serve him. But he's saying, the people whom the people have chosen and whom the Lord has chosen, his I will be, and I will serve in his presence. Absalom is not saying, I want you to serve him, but the guy says, I'm going to serve you. That should have been something to Absalom. Why are you appointing yourself to serve me? I have not called you to serve me. But remember, this was exactly what David had what? Told him. This is what David had told him to say. When he reached there, we can go there and read it. Chapter 15 from verses 30. He said, so David went up by the ascent of Mount Olives and wept as he went up. And he had his head covered and went barefoot. And all the people who were with him covered their heads and went up weeping as they went up. Then someone told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. And David said, O Lord, I pray, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. Now it happened, when David had come into the top of the mountain where he worshipped, there was Hushai the Archite coming to meet him with his robe torn and dust on his head. And David said to him, if you go with me, then you'll be a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I'll be your servant, O king, as I was with your fathers, I'll read 34 again. But if you go with me, then you'll be a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I'll be your servant, O king, as I was your father's servant previously, so I will now also be your servant, that then you may defeat the counsel of Ahithophel for me. So these are the exact words that David told him. He says, when you go back to him, tell him that, you know what, I served your father so well and so faithfully, so I also desire to serve you just like I served him. And this is what he's saying to Absalom right now. He's like, hey, I was a good guy with your dad. I really served him so well, and you could perhaps also use my help. And you see, when you are a young man like Absalom and you want to set up a new government, many times you need these seasoned old politicians to be there, to help you, to guide you through this new phase, in this new line that you are trying to do. And this is a part where this is what's going to make Absalom to be king or not. His acceptance of Hushai is very critical to his kingship. And if he accepts him, things are going to be different for him. Verses 20, then Absalom said to Ahithophel, give advice to what we should do. He never actually gave him an answer. He never said, don't come to serve me. I don't need your help. I don't need your service. But also, he never said, serve me. He just left it there. I think he's just like, well, let the old man hang around. And then he turned to his old friend. Ahithophel is like, okay, Ahithophel, you are the wise guy here. What should we give advice as to what we should do? Now, he tells you that Absalom, though he wanted to be king, but he was going to rely so much on these old folks to help him navigate through these waters. And Ahithophel said to Absalom, go into your father's concubines whom he has left to keep the house. And all Israel, we hear that you are abhorred by your father. Then the hands of all who are with you will be strong. Wow, what an advice. I don't know if Absalom was surprised to hear such advice because he asked for it. There it is. But it sounds like a very, very bad idea. But according to when we read down further, it says that, so they pitched a tent for Absalom on the top of the house, and Absalom went into his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. Now, the advice of Ahithophel, which he gave in those days, was as if one had inquired at the oracle of God. So was all the advice of Ahithophel, both with David and with Absalom. Listen, dude, to hear from Ahithophel was as if you have heard from God. Like when you went in his presence and asked for advice, this guy was very solid with his advice. He really was smart. And now even when we look at the advice that he has given to Absalom, it sounds despicable. It sounds insane. It sounds like, bro, it's very uncouth, uncivilized. But politically, it is the right. It's a brilliant advice. Why? Because people are following Absalom, but they're not settled in their hearts. They're like, he's David's son. We are putting our life on the line for David's son. What if they reconcile? What if David comes back and the son's like, Dad, I'm so sorry. I was just trying to see how it feels like to be a king. But now I've tasted it. I feel like I don't want to be a king. Please take your place back. And all these guys who have been piping and then hyping him will be executed for treason. And that would be a very bad place for all of them, including Ahithophel. Ahithophel is like, man, I'm following this young man, but bro, what if actually they reconcile? Because these people are family. So Ahithophel is looking for something that would actually make father and son relationship to be destroyed totally and completely. That's what we call irreconcilable, where you will never reconcile again. Then that means that now, first, Ahithophel, his position will be secure. He knows now we can be solid together, and we don't have to be afraid that one day you guys can actually make up, and then we all now end up on the gallows being hanged. That's for starters. But also, he's saying, people who have come behind you, who are here to support you, once you do that, they will know that now you've crossed that line. You know when you cross that line and everybody says you've crossed that line, there's no turning back. That is the Rubicon. I don't know, some of you have really studied Roman history. Roman history talks about Caesar. Caesar goes into Gaul. Caesar was a consul, a Roman consul. And then when he went to Gaul, Gaul is the modern day, France. These French people were unruly. Fighters, warriors. They are the only people that were not subjugated by the Romans at the moment because of their fierceness. But then Caesar says, I want to go to Gaul and I want to bring all those. They were not French at that time. They were called Gaul. That's where the book of Galatians, because the book of Galatians was written for those Gauls, the French people. We call French them today. So he went over there with a battalion of soldiers, and they fought them for 8 solid years without coming back to Rome. Even his consulship expired, and he never came back because the law was saying you have to come back to Rome after 2 years, but he never came back. Now, other people wanted to take the place that he was having, but they could not. And Pompey was his father-in-law. But what happened was, Rome declared him as the enemy of the state. And he said that once he comes back, we need to arrest him. We need to execute him for treason. Because he has kept the Roman soldiers out of the constitution. Now, Caesar, because he has been with these men for 8 years, they had a bond. And Caesar says, should I go to be hanged by those senators, the old guys who have not been fighting? And the soldiers said, no. He says, those old senators out there, they are actually corrupt. We need to go back down there and do what? Set things right. But the law was this: a Roman soldier was not allowed to enter Rome with a sword. Because you're coming back to your people, they don't want to see those swords. And if a counsel is coming back, you don't come back with a battalion. You come back as civilians. Now this is what they had to cross, that called the Rubicon River. It's what separated Rome and France. But the moment Caesar crossed that river with these soldiers, he had crossed the line. It meant there was no turning back. And any soldier who crossed that river, he was fully committed to go and commit treason to his country. He was committed to go and kill the countrymen. And that's what he did. And that's where the term comes that you crossed the Rubicon. And this is what actually Ahithophel is saying. It's like, you know what? You need to cross the line if you really want to be king. Because your kingship is not just going to be for just thinking you're going to be there and be nice. You have to do something that's going to actually send a message. And Absalom says, okay. And they pitched a tent up on the roof. Do you remember what happened on the roof? Yeah. That's where David stood. And saw Bathsheba down there taking a shower. Now, Ahithophel is saying all these things first to consolidate his position in the rebellion alongside these other people, but secondly also to humiliate David. It's actually replaying the same scene that David did. It's like, hey, David, this is where you stood and you humiliated my family, my granddaughter. He says, I am also going to actually play the same tape for you. That you're going to be humiliated actually the same way you did for me. And that was also cold. Really. Now, if you read back in chapter 12, you remember Nathan when he came to David, and he told him the things that David had done, how he had killed him, and how he had taken his wife, and so on and so forth. But then David acknowledges his sin and says, I have sinned, in verses 13 of chapter 12. And Nathan said to David, the Lord has also put away your sin. You shall not die. However, because by this deed you have given great occasion to the enemies of the Lord to blaspheme, this child also who is born to you shall surely die. And then Nathan departed. But before that, in verses 10, or let's start with 9, it says that, why have you despised the commandment of the Lord to do evil in his sight? You have killed Uriah with the Hittite with the sword. You have taken his wife to be your wife, and have killed him with the sword of the people of Ammon. 10. Now therefore the sword shall never depart from your house, because you have despised me and have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. Thus says the Lord, behold, I will raise up adversity against you from your own house, and I will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor, and he shall lie with your wife in the sight of the sun. You see that? That's many years ago. Years have passed actually since that time where David actually done this. Maybe they are actually right now about 10 years past since this was spoken. But this is what exactly is happening there in chapter 16. Because here, according to Nathan, he says that God had promised that he will raise up adversity against David from his own house. Now, this is David's own son who has actually risen against him. David's adversary right now is his own son, Absalom. But also, he's saying that I will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor. This was God saying all these things. And then he says, he shall lie with your wives in the sight of the sun. Now, Ahithophel, I don't know if he remembers all these things, but Ahithophel has malice in his heart. He has anger in his heart. He is hurt because of what David did way back in chapter 12. So he's like, you know what? I want David also to be humiliated like he did with me. And he sets up the same thing for David. Now, here Absalom also, he goes up in the tent. And everybody was watching. And he did this thing just like God had promised. So God's word was going to be sure that it was going to be fulfilled. And God had said that David did it secretly, but it was going to be done before all Israel, before the sun. And it is what Absalom has done. And chapter 17, I'm going to end at verses 3. It says, moreover, Ahithophel said to Absalom, now let me choose 12,000 men, and I will arise and pursue David tonight. And I will come upon him while he is very weak and weary, and make him afraid. And all the people who are with him will flee, and I will strike only the king. Then I will bring back all the people to you when all return except the man whom you seek. And all the people will be at peace. And the saying pleased Absalom and all the elders of Israel. This guy is very methodical. And he's very cutthroat, Ahithophel. He has been able to successfully guide Absalom to do things that were not right, actually, even in the eyes of God. Though God said it will happen. And this is a very hard one, because God said this would happen. But God is not happy with this, though, at the same time. Because this is against God's law. We read it somewhere in Leviticus chapter 18, where it says that you shall never uncover your father's nakedness. And he says that anyone who does that shall be put to death, right? And now, Ahithophel, knowing the law of God, he has still actually proposed for that. And Absalom also, he knows that this is very wrong according to God's word, because that's why he killed his own brother Amnon for uncovering his what? His sister's nakedness. But because now they are all convoluted into these political ambitions and revenge, now they don't care about God's law. They don't care about all these other things except the pain and the revenge that they have in their hearts. But now, what actually Ahithophel is saying, we are done humiliating David, but it's not enough. We need to go and kill him dead. And he's like, Absalom, you don't even have to come with me. Just give me 1,200 men and I go with them. He's still giving advice. And they say his advice is always good. And he says, people are tired. And David is totally tired, because we read there in chapter 15, said David was very tired. Very, very tired. I think chapter 16, we read it somewhere. Let me see if we can. Chapter 16, verses 14. It says, after this guy Shimei had thrown rocks at them and insults, now the king and all, I'm reading 14 of 16. Now the king and all the people who were with him became weary. So they refreshed themselves there. David actually, it's true, is very, very tired. So Ahithophel is smart. He knows. I don't know, he had this gift of really reading into situations and knowing what's happening. And that's what he's proposing to who? To Absalom right now. Is like, the guy must be tired. He's an old guy. He's tired. Just give me a few men here. We can go and overrun them so swiftly. Because what he wanted for Ahithophel, he wanted this takeover to be as quick as possible. Very methodical. And he's like, we don't have to keep David running, because he will be dangerous when he regains his what? Energy. He'll be very dangerous to us. We need to go and strike him as soon as possible. I think there's an English saying that says that you strike the iron while it's still hot. And that's what Ahithophel is saying. We need to go and strike David when he's still in that vulnerable position, where he's still in shock, where he's still not, he's still figuring out what to do. And verses 4 say that actually this saying, it pleased Absalom. He really was happy with the advice. And Absalom is willing to see the head of David being brought back to him. He's like, yeah, kill him dead. Verses 5, it says, then Absalom said, oh, wait a minute. I need a second opinion. So he calls Hushai, say, hey, Hushai, come here. And what you say about this? And when Hushai came to Absalom, Absalom spoke to him, saying, Ahithophel has spoken in this manner. Shall we do as he says? If not, speak up. Man, why does he need a second opinion? I don't know what this makes Ahithophel to feel, that actually his advice, someone else has to validate it. So that the king is now asking for second opinion. 7, so Hushai said to Absalom, the advice that Ahithophel has given you is not good at all. It is bad idea. For said Hushai, you know your father and his men, that they are mighty men, and they are enraged in their minds, like a bear robbed of her cubs in the field. And your father is a man of war, and will not camp with people. Surely by now he is hidden in some pit or in some other place. And it will be when some men are overthrown at the first, that whoever hears it will say, there is a slaughter among the people who follow Absalom. And even he who is valiant, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, will melt completely. For all Israel knows that your father is a mighty man, and those who are with him are also valiant. Therefore, I advise that all be fully gathered to you from Dan to Beersheba, like the sand that is by the sea, for the multitude, that you go to battle in person. So we will come upon him in some place where he may be found, and we will fall on him as dew falls on the ground. And on him and all the men who are with him there shall not be left so much as one. Moreover, if he has withdrawn into a city, then all Israel shall bring ropes to that city, and we will put it into the river until there is not one small stone phone there. So Absalom and all the men of Israel said, the advice of Hushai the Archite is better than the advice of Ahithophel. For the Lord had purposed the Lord had purposed to defeat the good advice of Ahithophel to the intent that the Lord might bring disaster on Absalom. This was David's prayer, that Ahithophel's advice would be turned into foolishness. And that's why David sent Hushai, such that Hushai may defeat the advice of Ahithophel. And by God's luck, it has happened. Now, that was the button that actually David pushed that is working in his favor. He could have been dead tonight, and it was gonna work. But the Lord still had things in store for David. The Lord was saying, it is not over yet, David. I know you've gone through all these things, but I'm not going to let you die yet. And this is where I want to end today's lesson, that God is not done with David yet. No matter what the things David had to go through. No matter how many people wanted to end David's life, but God said, no, David's life is still going to live. I still want to use him a few more years. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you so much for your word, and your word is true. We thank you for the life of David, that we can learn a lot of things from it. We thank you that we see how you answer prayer, that you answered David's prayer when he sent this guy called Hushai to go back to Jerusalem. That by Hushai's presence in Jerusalem, David's life was spared. Lord, I pray that also you surround us with men and women who think like Hushai, who are there to defeat the plans of the enemy, who are there to defeat the enemy's plans and plots that he wants to do to destroy us. The enemy will not destroy us. Satan will not plot against us and succeed, because you render all his plans void. We thank you, Jesus, and in your precious name we prayed. Amen. And God bless you and keep you.